My name is Olivia Davies. I used to build things, software, systems, entire digital worlds built on lines of code and the unyielding logic of algorithms. Now, I try to hold one thing together. My morning, my home, this house. They say programmers deal in absolutes, in binary, in unbreakable commands. But after the fracture, after Michael and Leo, after the house started to breathe, I learned different. I learned about the rules, 7 of them. Rules about making coffee, feeding cats, even choosing my clothes. Rules I have to follow every single morning to keep reality from crumbling. Because here, in this mid-century modern cage, rule number 1 is absolute. Never check the clock before the kettle whistles. Time here has its own order. I was a software engineer, a woman of algorithms and immutable logic. My world was defined by clean code, stable systems, and the precise calculation of input and output. My home, a testament to my philosophy, was a mid-century modern masterpiece. All clean lines, open spaces, and an almost brutalist honesty. My husband Michael, an architect who appreciated my logical mind, filled it with warmth and light. My son Leo, a whirlwind of joy and curiosity, made it sing. We were a perfect system built on foundations of love and logic. Then came the fracture, not in the network, not in the code, but in time itself. It happened 3 years ago, October 3rd, 2021, a Tuesday morning. Michael and Leo were leaving for Leo's first soccer practice. I remember the smell of Michael's coffee, the sound of Leo's laughter as he chased the tabby cat, Whiskers, through the living room. Then a sudden, blinding flash. Not a light, but an absence of light. A temporal tear, a void that swallowed everything. When my vision cleared, the coffee was cold, the laughter gone. Michael and Leo vanished. The police called it a tragic, inexplicable disappearance. No forced entry, no struggle, just nothing, as if they had simply ceased to be. My world shattered. My beautiful, ordered house became a mausoleum of echoes. I tried to rebuild, to rationalize, to apply logic to an illogical void. But the house changed. It began to breathe, to shift, to grieve with me, but in a way that defied all programming. Objects would appear in places they shouldn't be. Memories would flicker, replacing the present with an impossible past. The very fabric of reality, once so stable, became fluid, a canvas for my grief and its own nascent, unsettling consciousness. I needed to make sense of it. I needed to impose order, not to bring them back. I learned quickly that was impossible, but to keep their memory alive, to maintain some semblance of the world they once inhabited. I thought I could control the chaos, code its boundaries. But the house, it seemed, had its own rules. Rules that began to manifest in the quiet desperation of my mornings. Rules that, I soon discovered, were the only way to hold the fracture at bay. The rules weren't written. They manifested, emerging from the house's shifting reality as subtle urgings, cold certainties in the back of my mind. Each one was a desperate attempt to impose logic on the illogical, a fragile firewall against a flood of unreality. Here are the rules, not from a manual, but etched into my very being, born from observation and subtle, horrifying consequences. Rule number 1, never check the clock before the kettle whistles. My insight. Time here isn't linear. It flows like a corrupted data stream, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes reversing. The kettle's whistle is its anchor, its signal that the current is stable. To check the clock before is to invite the past too close, the present too far, corrupting the timeline. Rule number 2, the coffee must be black, no sugar, no cream. My insight, purity, unadulterated. The house demands clarity. Any deviation, any attempt to sweeten or soften the bitter truth distorts its perception. It's a ritual of acceptance, a taste of unvarnished reality, untainted by illusion. Rule number 3, if you see the gray cat whiskers in the kitchen, never feed him. He has already eaten. If you see the black cat shadow in the living room, always leave a saucer of milk. He has an eternal hunger. My insight, 2 sides of a fractured coin. Whiskers is a memory, a cached image of what was. Shadow is an echo, a hunger from what could be. To conflate them is to invite the outside of the anomaly, the corrupted data, into the inside of my stable system. Rule number 4, after showering, always wear the blue button-down shirt and gray trousers, unless the wardrobe presents a specific single item of different clothing. My insight, my identity is a constant variable. The house attempts to clothe me in other narratives, other lives, other identities. The consistent outfit grounds myself, a constant against its variables. To deviate, unless directed by the system, is to accept another's role, another's code. Rule number 5, if the closet door in the master bedroom is ajar, click it shut. If it is fully open, leave it that way until nightfall. My insight, the closet is a threshold, a buffered port. Partially open, it's a crack to be sealed. Fully open, it's a portal waiting for something to return or something to leave. To close it fully when it's wide open is to trap what yearns to leave or what is trying to enter, causing a system overflow. Rule number 6, never look at your toast burn. If it burns, bury it in the garden without looking back. My insight, the house feeds on chaos, on unmanaged errors. Burnt toast is a small manageable chaos, a system error. To look at it is to acknowledge its destructive power, to empower the disorder, to validate the corruption. To bury it is to return it to the earth, a ritual of cleansing, a deletion of the error from the active log. Rule number 7, after dressing, always check the framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Michael and Leo must be smiling. My insight, this is the anchor, the image of their happiness, frozen in time, a stable data point. If they are not smiling, the fracture has worsened. To leave it unresolved is to surrender to the despair of a reality that cannot be restored, a system crash. I held on to these rules like a programmer clings to a stable build. They were my sanity, my firewall against the insidious creep of the house's new, terrifying normal. My mornings became a meticulous dance, a ritual against the encroaching chaos. Every movement, every action, a calculated step in a desperate battle for normalcy. It was a Monday morning, a little over 6 months after the fracture. I was making coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen. The water in the kettle began to heat, a low murmur building to a crescendo. I was running a few minutes behind schedule, a rare occurrence for me. My gaze instinctively darted towards the antique grandfather clock in the hall. Rule number 1, never check the clock before the kettle whistles. Time here isn't linear. It flows like a corrupted data stream, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes reversing. The kettle's whistle is its anchor, its signal that the current is stable. To check the clock before is to invite the past too close, the present too far, corrupting the timeline. My hand was already reaching for my wrist, for the smartwatch I always wore, a relic of my old, ordered life. The kettle was just a second away from its shrill song, but I faltered. My hand hesitated. The image of a shattered clock face, its hand spinning wildly, an infinite loop of temporal distortion, flashed in my mind. A cold certainty, a primal fear, slammed into me. I snatched my hand back. The kettle shrieked, a loud, piercing whistle that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the silence. I checked the clock. 7:01 a.m., exactly on schedule. A profound sense of relief, cold and sharp, washed over me. But then, as I poured my coffee, I noticed something. The small brass pendulum inside the grandfather clock, it was swinging in reverse. Tick-tock, tock-tick. I blinked. It snapped back, swinging normally. My mind, a programmer's mind, tried to rationalize it. A visual glitch, a residual echo from the kettle's whistle. But a new, terrifying understanding began to settle. The house wasn't just observing my rules, it was responding. It was testing my code. And in that brief moment of almost breaking rule number 1, I had glimpsed a ripple in the temporal flow, a flicker of its true, malevolent power. The coffee, black and bitter, tasted of ozone and old memories. A debugging process, but for reality itself. The house grew bolder. It no longer just tested my adherence to the rules. It began to actively subvert them, presenting me with paradoxes designed to break my logic. Rule number 3. If you see the gray cat Whiskers in the kitchen, never feed him. He has already eaten. If you see the black cat Shadow in the living room, always leave a saucer of milk. He has an eternal hunger. One morning, after a week of unsettling quiet, I walked into the kitchen. There, curled on the counter, was Whiskers, the familiar gray tabby. He yawned, stretching languidly, then looked at me with his intelligent green eyes. He was a constant comforting presence, a ghost of a pet from a time when my family was whole. I always made sure to avoid feeding him following the rule. He was a memory, a cached image, not a hunger. But then the doorbell rang. An unexpected visitor, Mrs. Gable, my next-door neighbor. A sweet, elderly woman who always brought homemade cookies and a quiet, knowing gaze. She often expressed her concern about my solitude and my unusual habits. "Livia, dear," she began, her voice a soft purr, "I saw your cat looking rather thin this morning. Such a beautiful gray tabby. Here, I brought some tuna just for him." She held out a small can. My heart hammered. Whiskers was still on the counter, his green eyes fixed on the tuna. Mrs. Gable had seen him, and she was offering food. My mind raced. If I accepted the tuna, if I fed Whiskers, I would break rule number 3. But to refuse Mrs. Gable, a kind, well-meaning neighbor, would be rude, suspicious. It would invite external scrutiny, another fracture in my carefully constructed reality, an unhandled exception. "Oh, Mrs. Gable, thank you," I said, forcing a smile. "But Whiskers has a very sensitive stomach. He only eats a specific diet. I wouldn't want to upset him." She just smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, dear. Well, I'll just leave it on your porch then, in case his appetite changes." She placed the tuna can on my doorstep, then turned and walked away. I let out a shaky breath. Crisis averted. I walked back into the kitchen. Whiskers was gone, but then, from the living room, I heard a soft meow. A deeper, more resonant sound. I walked into the living room. There, on the Persian rug, sat Shadow, the sleek black cat, his amber eyes fixed on me, a low rumble of hunger emanating from him, and by his side, on the floor, was a saucer, empty. My blood ran cold. I had just refused to feed Whiskers in the kitchen, claiming he had eaten. Now Shadow was demanding his milk in the living room. It was a test, a deliberate, cruel choice, a logical paradox. I had satisfied the external world but had angered the internal. I knew the rule: leave milk for Shadow. But my refusal to feed Whiskers had created a new kind of imbalance. I looked at Shadow. His eyes, usually pools of amber, seemed to deepen, to reflect a subtle shift in the room around him. The antique armchair in the corner seemed to vibrate. A faint hum. The house was displeased. My attempt to control one variable had opened another. I quickly poured milk into the saucer. Shadow lapped at it, his gaze never leaving mine, as if he knew the delicate balance I was trying to maintain, as if he understood the underlying code. The subtle shifts began to take their toll. My meticulously designed routine, once a source of comfort, now felt like a desperate performance, a fragile subroutine. The house was not just responding, it was subtly influencing me, trying to erase my identity, to absorb me into its own fractured narrative. Rule number 4, after showering, always wear the blue button-down shirt and gray trousers. Unless the wardrobe presents a specific, single item of different clothing. Rule number 5, if the closet door in the master bedroom is ajar, click it shut. If it is fully open, leave it that way until nightfall. One particularly disorienting morning, I woke up with a profound sense of wrongness. The light filtering through the blinds was too green, like a corrupted display. The air felt heavy, metallic. I went to the shower, performing my ritual mechanically. After, I walked to the master bedroom closet. The door was wide open. My blood ran cold. Fully open. Leave it until nightfall. A silent warning. A critical state. My gaze darted to my usual blue button-down and gray trousers, neatly folded, but beside them, on a hanger, was a different outfit. A soft, flowing dress, the color of twilight, made of a fabric that shimmered faintly. Eleanor's dress. My wife, Eleanor's dress. Her perfume, a delicate blend of jasmine and old paper, seemed to linger in the air. My mind raced. Rule number 4, unless the wardrobe presents a specific, single item of different clothing. It was presenting Eleanor's dress, my wife's dress. My hand reached for my blue shirt, then hesitated. To ignore the house's offering was to break a rule. To wear it was to accept a new narrative, to run a different program. I looked at the closet door, still wide open, a gaping maw into another reality. I looked at Eleanor's dress, shimmering faintly in the dim light. I could almost smell her perfume, a delicate blend of jasmine and old paper. A wave of profound grief mixed with a terrifying longing washed over me. The house was trying to dress me in her memory, to clothe me in her absence, to overwrite my identity with hers. I couldn't do it. My identity, my last tether to my own self, my core code, was too precious. I grabbed the blue shirt, the gray trousers. I dressed quickly, my hands trembling. As I did, the closet door, which had been fully open, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to close, not with a click, but with a soft hissing sound, like a sigh of displeasure, a process terminating. I rushed out of the room, my heart hammering, but as I walked past the full-length mirror in the hallway, I saw it, my reflection. I was wearing the blue shirt and gray trousers, but around my waist, tied in a delicate bow, was Eleanor's shimmering twilight dress. And my face seemed softer. The lines of worry around my eyes subtly altered, my hair longer, framing a gaze that was not entirely mine. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through my reflected hand. I gasped, stumbling back. The reflection snapped back to normal, just my tired face, my usual clothes. But the image of that distorted feminine visage, my wife's dress clinging to my form, was seared into my mind. The house wasn't just bending reality, it was bending me. My identity was fading, blurring with the echoes of those it had lost. I had tried to resist rule number 4, but the house, in its subtle, insidious way, had asserted its will. It was rewriting my subroutine. The house became a battleground for my soul. My mornings, once a meticulous ritual of control, were now a desperate fight against the insidious creep of the unreal. Each broken rule, each subtle deviation, chipped away at my sanity, blurring the lines between Olivia and the house's grand, unsettling design, a constant stream of errors and warnings. Rule number 6, never look at your toast burn. If it burns, bury it in the garden without looking back. My ambition to maintain order, twisted and desperate, gave way to a new kind of creative drive, a test of the house's true hunger. One morning, I decided to deliberately challenge rule number 6. I toasted 2 slices of bread, placing them in the ancient chrome toaster Michael had loved. And then I watched. The toaster hummed, the coils glowing a fiery red. The bread slowly turned golden, then brown, then a faint, unsettling black. The smell of burning bread, acrid and sharp, filled the kitchen. I watched it, defying the rule, my eyes fixed on the darkening surface. The house seemed to hold its breath. The hum in the walls intensified, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in my chest. The light from the kitchen window, usually bright and clear, seemed to dim, casting strange, dancing shadows. The toast turned completely black, carbonized. A small, perfect chaos, an unhandled error. I pulled it out, my hands trembling. It was utterly ruined, a sacrifice to the house's hunger for disorder. I walked to the back door, the burnt toast clutched in my hand. The garden was a mess of overgrown weeds, a reflection of my neglected grief. I walked to the spot where Michael had planted Leo's favorite swing set. It was withered, broken, a stark contrast to the vibrant reds and yellows it once held. This was where I was supposed to bury it. As I knelt, my back to the house, the burnt toast held tightly. A voice whispered from behind me, not Michael's, not Leo's, but a voice layered with both, fragmented, distorted, yet achingly familiar. Olivia, look back. He's here. My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to turn to see what impossible vision the house was offering, to see Michael, to see Leo. My grief, raw and ever-present, was a potent lure. But rule number 6 echoed, bury it without looking back. To look back was to acknowledge the illusion, to grant it power, to accept the corrupted data. I clenched my jaw. I forced my hand to dig, pushing the burnt toast into the cold earth. The whisper intensified, becoming a chorus of muffled pleas tangled with ghostly laughter. The ground beneath my knees seemed to hum, to vibrate with a latent energy. I felt a cold touch on my shoulder. "Mommy, don't leave me." Leo's voice, pure, unblemished, my resolve fractured, my head snapped around. I saw him, standing just a few feet away by the withered swing set. Leo, not as he was, but as a shimmering, translucent figure, his form wavering like heat haze on a summer road. His green eyes, so like Michael's, were wide with a heartbreaking sadness. Beside him, a similar figure of Michael, more subtle, less defined, his hand resting on Leo's shoulder. They were there. They were real, a perfect, impossible rendering. "Michael! Leo!" I cried, tears streaming down my face. I reached out, desperate to touch them, to pull them back into my world, to restore the corrupted files. They smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. But their smiles were sad, filled with an ancient weariness. And then the house intervened. The humming intensified, becoming a roar. The ground beneath me buckled. The spectral forms of Michael and Leo began to distort, to stretch, to fragment. The garden around us melted, revealing glimpses of other places, other times. A child's playground, empty and desolate, a burning building, a hospital ward. The house was not just showing me my family, it was showing me the fracture itself, the raw, bleeding wound in time, the corrupted timelines. "Olivia! The picture!" Michael's voice, 1,000 echoes. "The balance!" My gaze darted back to the house, to the mantelpiece visible through the open back door, the framed photograph. Rule number 7, after dressing, always check the framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Michael and Leo must be smiling. I had forgotten. In my grief, in my desperate pursuit of my family, I had forgotten the final rule, the anchor, the stable data point, the visual testament to their happiness, to the normalcy I so desperately craved. The image in my mind of their smiling faces, etched in my memory, began to crack. Their smiles faltered, their eyes filled with a profound sadness, a vacant, empty stare. The house was showing me the truth, not of their happiness, but of their consumption, of their loss. The corruption was spreading. The spectral forms of Michael and Leo in the garden dissolved completely, swirling into a vortex of green and violet light that pulsed with malevolent energy. It wasn't just grief, it was hunger. The house wasn't just feeding on my memories, it was feeding on my hope, my defiance. It was devouring the very essence of my family, twisting their images into lures, corrupted code. I stumbled back into the house, my mind reeling. The kitchen was a mess, cabinets open, drawers pulled out, everything in disarray. The kettle lay on its side, whistling a discordant, broken tune. The clock, its pendulum still, displayed a chaotic jumble of numbers. 3:17 a.m., October 3rd, 2011. A year after the fracture, the house had pulled me into its chaotic timeline. My grip on reality was slipping. My system was crashing. I collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my morning ritual, the shattered fragments of my sanity. The house hummed around me, a low, satisfied purr. It had broken me. My rules, my meticulously constructed firewall against its chaos, had failed. But then I looked at the mantelpiece, the photograph, Michael and Leo. Their faces were still smiling, faintly, almost imperceptibly, but they were smiling. My memory of them, my love for them, my desperate need for their happiness had held. The house could bend reality. But it couldn't corrupt what was truly held in my heart, my core data. The house had shown me the truth. Michael and Leo were gone, not just vanished, but absorbed, diffused into the temporal fracture. Their echoes lingered, their memories were bait, but they were not coming back. My grief, my desperate rituals, had merely been keeping their essence contained, preventing the fracture from fully collapsing my world. But it was also feeding the house, allowing it to experiment, to grow bolder, to consume more. I wasn't a victim. I was an unwitting architect of its chaos, a programmer of its hunger. And then a new thought, cold and precise, cut through the haze of my grief. If the house fed on disorder, and it fed on rigid, monotonous order, what if it needed a different kind of architecture? What if it needed creative chaos? What if it needed a guiding hand not to contain, but to direct its hunger, to debug its code, to introduce new, unexpected variables? My programmer's mind, once focused on static systems, began to see new algorithms, not of fixed states, but of fluid realities, not of absolute order, but of controlled chaos. The house wanted to consume? I would give it something to digest, something it couldn't merely absorb and repeat, something it would have to process, something it would have to compute. I picked myself up. My hands, which had trembled with grief and fear, were now steady, filled with a new, terrifying purpose. I walked to the mantelpiece. I looked at the photograph. Michael and Leo were smiling. I picked it up. Their faces, now clearer, brighter, seemed to nod. I am Olivia Davies, and I am no longer just living in this house. I am its programmer, its curator, its benevolent tyrant. The mornings are different now. My ritual is still meticulous, but it's no longer about desperate containment. It's about calculated subversion. I still brew my black coffee, but I occasionally add a single forbidden drop of cream, watching the ripples in the house's reality. I watch the cats. Sometimes I deliberately ignore Whiskers, letting him meow insistently. Sometimes I forget Shadow's milk. The house purrs, it shifts, it learns, it computes. I still wear my blue shirt and gray trousers, but some mornings the wardrobe presents a different choice, a vibrant, audacious color I never would have worn. I wear it. I embrace the house's attempts to dress me in new narratives, to run new programs, not with fear, but with a strange, dark satisfaction. I am not losing my identity. I am expanding it. I am becoming a meta-programmer, adapting to the house's shifting code. And the closet door? If it's ajar, I click it shut. If it's fully open, I leave it. But now, I sometimes place a single unexpected item inside. A book Michael loved, a drawing Leo made, a subtle offering, a new variable, a deliberate bug. The burnt toast? I still bury it. But now, I sometimes etch a symbol into its charred surface before consigning it to the earth, a symbol of calculated chaos, a command line for disorder. The house now hums with a different energy, not chaos, but a carefully curated unpredictability. It's no longer feeding on monotonous repetition or raw disorder. It's feeding on my creative subversion, my deliberate acts of calculated disruption. I'm giving it a new kind of story to tell. My story. And the fragments of Michael and Leo? They are still here, but now they dance in the periphery, not as lures for my grief, but as subtle collaborators in my new architectural design, my new code. Their echoes are no longer painful. They are part of the house's living, breathing narrative, shaped by my hand. I am Olivia Davies, the programmer of chaos. I've found my purpose not in rebuilding the past, but in redesigning the present, one morning ritual at a time. The house is my server, reality is my code, and my morning routine is the algorithm for a terrifying, exhilarating new world. If you find yourself in a place that promises solace but demands conformity, pay close attention to the rules, because some homes don't just offer refuge, they offer a new reality, one designed by forces beyond your control. And sometimes the only way to survive is to become the architect of your own madness. But reality-bending homes aren't the only places where strange rules guard terrifying truths. Sometimes the most dangerous instructions come during a job interview late at night. Imagine a high-stakes midnight job interview that determines not just your career, but your very identity. Never look directly into the eyes of the interviewer. Their eyes reflect your true weaknesses, because some jobs don't want your talent, they want your soul. Subscribe to Midnight Rules and hit that notification bell for more bone-chilling tales of twisted rules that could save your life or cost you everything you hold dear. Next week, we face the ultimate professional challenge with the Midnight Interview: Rules for the Perfect Job.